thinking. This is manipulating and transforming information in memory to reason, to reflect, to think critically about things, evaluate problems, try to solve problems, and try to make decisions. Thinking in infancy, as you can probably have gathered, is going to be significantly more primitive than what we are capable of. They do have things they call concepts, and so this is cognitive groupings of similar objects, events, or people, and this is a key aspect of infants' cognitive development. As an example, infants 3 to 4 months of old can group objects together like animals. So at some level, they understand the idea of grouping things that belong together very early on, 3 to 4. It is unclear, though, however, how this early idea of concepts form. Infants' ability to categorize things like this early on, they call this perceptual categorization. With these categories, so they're similar things perceptually, like size, color, the way they move, things of this nature. It's not until about 7 or 9 months that infants form conceptual categories in comparison to just the perceptual categories. As an example of this categorization, in 9 to 11 months old, they are able to categorize a bird as an animal and airplanes as vehicles, even though perceptually they look more similar. So planes look like birds when they have their wings out, but 9 to 11 months olds can sort the bird with the animals and the plane with the vehicles. On a side note, here the text discusses the idea that infants can develop certain very passionate interests in particular types of objects. For Leif, this is cars. Wow, we have 1 million cars. We had so many of these little matchbox cars. You actually now have a truck to carry all of the cars. So he carries this big truck around with him all over that's a transport for, I think it holds like 24 of these little cars. He loves cars. We even listen to songs about cars. There's these, I can't remember what it's called, truck song something. And so there'll be songs about excavator and monster trucks, and he loves these videos. Probably going to be some gender differences here as well, start to develop on the things that they're passionate about. With the thinking in childhood, the executive function. So this is the number of higher level cognitive processes that are linked to the development of the brain's prefrontal cortex. We talked a little bit about this. Prefrontal cortex begins to develop and they're able to have more executive function. So they're able to manage their own thoughts. They're able to do goal-directed behaviors. Exercise, the very key self-control. It's the ability to finish tasks, your attention. And so just kind of another little side note. So your brain, you definitely want to protect it, especially this front part, because that is what controls, your self-regulation, your ability to finish tasks, your attention. There are athletes in different sports that will get damaged here to the frontal cortex, and they'll have a brain injury there, and it can cause them problems in self-regulation and attention. So again, definitely protect that. And with your kids, you definitely want to protect that. At first, when kids started wearing helmets all the time on bikes, it was kind of like, oh, well, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Why are you wearing helmets? Like, no, man, they should wear a helmet, because if they injure this part of the brain, it can affect the rest of their life. So protect your brains, protect your kids' brains, please. With this executive function in early childhood, it functions in the advances in cognitive inhibition, flexibility, goal setting, and delaying of gratification. Again, all super important tasks, or super important abilities. And advances in this are related to school readiness. Parents and teachers can play a role in trying to help them to develop these executive function skills. Executive function and good parenting skills are intertwined. They're related. What it says from the textbook is, there was a quote, "When we see kids with good executive function, we see adults around them that are good self-regulators." Parents model, they scaffold, and then they help to scaffold these skills. So if you want your kid to have good executive function, you kind of have to start with yourself a little bit, and you have to model these good behaviors of being a good self-regulator yourself. There are certain key dimensions of this executive function that appear to be most important in a child's cognitive development and school success. You have self-control, inhibition. You need these to be able to concentrate and persist on a task, inhibit incorrect responses, and resist impulses. So self-control is the first one. Working memory is the second one that's really important. And then the third one that they talk about is flexibility. And so you need to be able to use different strategies and perspectives. Essentially, what this cognitive flexibility is about. There is some research that suggests that executive function is a better predictor of school readiness than general IQ. So executive function might be more important than actually what your IQ is. The text talks about some things that can help to increase this. There might be some computer games that help with working memory. Montessori technique might work. Mindfulness might work. So we talked a little bit about mindfulness. We'll get a little bit more into it here in a second. And another thing that's really good to help executive function, exercise. So we talked about this in some of the other chapters. Exercise is not just for your physical body. It's also for your brain, which is a part of your body. If you want to be smarter, you should exercise. So kids that are good in this stuff in the executive function, they're good at inhibitory control. So they're able to wait their turn. They're not easily distracted. They're more persistent. They're less impulsive. They were more likely to still be in school. They were less likely to be involved in risky behaviors, and they were less likely to use drugs. In this study, with these kids they did this study with, it was a longitudinal study. And so they came back 30 years later to see how these kids were doing that were high in the executive functioning. Those kids that were higher in the executive functioning had better physical health, they had better mental health, they had more earnings, and they were happier. So again, if you can help your kid to develop these skills in executive function, it's highly possible that their entire lives will be better from that help. So if you can do it, you should. On the next slide, we will get into critical thinking.